What's up guys, it's me TrappedGamer here. Today we're going to be discussing the differences between last year's iPhone 13 Pro Max and this year's iPhone 14 Pro Max. Alright, so first thing let's talk about is the appearance. For the most part, the new iPhone 14 Pro Max doesn't really look that different from the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But however, if you do look closer, the cameras seem to stick out a little bit more as opposed to last year's model. And I would obviously highly recommend a case to protect the camera and phone. So for changes in the front of the iPhone, for instance, here, instead of having the notch from last year's model, they decided to put a pill-shaped system, which they called a dynamic island. Don't know why they called it that, but that's what it's called. It takes up less space and gives the iPhone 14 Pro series a look that's very unique as opposed to other phones, and most impressively, it bubbles up with notifications and other events. What's new with the iPhone 14 models is that there is the always on display, so basically if you press your power button, you get a slightly more dimmer lock screen where you can access notifications and stuff like that. And also the frame rates are dropped down to just 1 hertz, so it takes very, very, very little battery as opposed to just having your phone turned off. It doesn't really make much of a difference, really, in my opinion. It's just slightly more useful. Alright, so for last year's 13 Pro Max, it contained a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens, a 12 megapixel wide lens, and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens for optical zoom. And for this year, there's an addition of a 48 megapixel quad pixel sensor for the wide lens that's also 65% larger than the wide on the iPhone 13 Pro, and there's a stark departure from the 12 megapixel sensors Apple has used on multiple previous flagships. For the matters related to, for instance, flash photography on an iPhone, there is a new adaptive tone flash that adds adjustability to the flash a little bit more. By using 9 LEDs, the flash can adjust the pattern of light it produces so that the emitted light changes depending on the focal length of the photo itself. For the front of the iPhone 14 Pro Max, the models in the front for the cameras have the same 12 megapixels, though the company has made the aperture a bit wider and added better autofocus for FaceTime and video calls. And each year, Apple has been improving and the processing capabilities of its flagship phones with a new chip. The two iPhone 13 Pro models support an A15 Bionic chip, which uses a 6-core CPU and a 5-core GPU and 16-core neutral engine capable of 15.8 trillion operations per second. Yes, mind-blowing, isn't it? It also packs additional features like an image signal processor for better imaging, and the iPhone 14 Pro models pack a next-generation A16 Bionic processor. I mean, is that really surprising? It's A15 last year, A16 this year. Pretty easy to detect. Probably A17 next year. I wouldn't be surprised. And the regular iPhone 14 and Plus are still stuck with the A15 Bionic chips from last year, and I'm honestly not too pleased with that. The 13 Pro models have 5G connectivity, a trend Apple continues with for the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. However, the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max come with a new wave of satellite-based communication. Very interesting. Both models support emergency SOS via satellite, which means you'll be able to make emergency calls using satellite signals if you're not in an area near a cell tower. As far as other connectivity upgrades, the iPhone 14 Pro models support Wi-Fi 6 connectivity. Bluetooth 5.0 on the iPhone 13 Pro range has shifted to Bluetooth 5.3 for the iPhone 14 Pro. Like many iPhones before them, the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max continue to use the Lightning connector and also support Apple's upgraded MagSafe wireless charging standard. It is the same setup Apple used on the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. Apple also says that they've improved on the battery life. The iPhone 14 Pro Max goes up to 23 hours of battery when used for local video playback, while the 14 Pro Max can last up to 29 hours, basically more than a day's worth of using a phone. Very interesting. Regarding weight, the iPhone 13 Pro Max weighs 8.46 ounces, and as far as weight differences, the new devices are slightly heavier than the previous generation. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is 8.47 ounces, and if I did not tell you this, you probably wouldn't notice unless you probably held both of them, except even though I'm holding both of them, the weight doesn't really tell that much of a difference, except for the last video when I was unboxing the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. The 14 Pro was lighter. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, they are equipped with Super Retina XDR displays, which are OLED based and offer support for the company's 120Hz refresh rate. And when it comes to the 14 Pro Max, not a lot has really changed on the display front. It has a Super Retina XDR display that's, again, also OLED based. It also retains the 6.7-inch display sizes. The 13 Pro Max has a 2778 by 1284 resolution at 485 ppi. The resolutions are higher, but only by a few pixels, and the 14 Pro Max has a 2796 by 1290 display. In terms of color options, the iPhone 14 Pro Max has some new ones. For instance, there's Deep Purple, which is this color, Gold, Silver, and Space Black, as opposed to last year where the 13 Pro Max had 5 different color variants: Alpine Green, Silver, Gold, Graphite, and this, Sierra Blue. Note, Apple has stopped selling Pro models of the iPhone 13 because capitalism, and only available ones are available currently for the iPhone 13s are just the 13 mini and the 13 itself. Apple's 13 Pro models shipped with 128 gigs, 256 gigs, 512 gigs, and 1 terabyte storage options. The 14 Pro models share the same configurations. The company has stuck with the same pricing for relative capacities for the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. Entry-level 128GB models cost around $999 and $1,099, while 1 terabyte models cost around $1,500 and $1,600, depending on the screen size. And also, the prices are specific for the United States. They are different in other places. And here's just something I want to add specifically about the new iPhone 14 Pro Max. So, while my dad was setting it up, it stopped charging and sent a message because it was too hot to continue to charge. And for some weird reason, the specific phone, according to my dad, overheats when using it for about 30 minutes. And my dad adds the plea of, Apple, if you are listening, please fix the issue. For those of you who are wondering if it's worth the upgrade compared to last year's models, it's a good idea to compare them to the devices you already have. Most people who already own 13 Pro models probably wouldn't need to feel the change as to battery life, and the overall package still kind of remains pretty similar. But those people that are coming from an older device surely will appreciate the new 14 Pro models because of all the unique designs and tweaks made. And because this is so good, I might even record some of my YouTube videos using this iPhone 14 Pro Max. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.